How you doing? I'm Chad Millman, Chief Content Officer of the Action Network, and I don't know if you know this or not. There is a Polka Hall of Fame, a Pinball Hall of Fame, a Magic the Freakin' Gathering Hall of Fame, but there is no Sports Betting Hall of Fame. Today, we are going to start the movement to change that. Simon Hunter, Darren Rovell, Raheem Palmer, all from the Action Network. We are going to figure out who should be the initial entrants in the Sports Betting Hall of Fame. Let's get to it. The DraftKings Sports Betting National Championship is coming up. This is the opportunity for anyone who enters to come out as a superstar on the path to becoming a Sports Betting Hall of Famer. If we were to create, because we are the experts, we are the Action Network, we know more about betting than anybody else, if we were to create our own mythical Sports Betting Hall of Fame, we'll build a huge palace on the boardwalk in Atlantic City. We have to put in 5 entrants. I've got thoughts on who it should be. I'm sure you have thoughts on who it should be. Simon, Jersey native, give me your first entrant into the Sports Betting Hall of Fame.
I mean, how can I not go with Jimmy the Greek? Everyone remembers watching Jimmy Greek back in the day. I mean, he's just one of those guys where felt like he was the first one to really bring sports betting lines to the mainstream media. So for me, he'd be my first nominee.
Darren Rovell has a great Jimmy the Greek story about something he once almost gave me.
I once almost bought the Rolodex for Jimmy the Greek, for those who are young, the actual contact book, and I bought it for a song, and someone then spent a ton of money on it. But seriously, Jimmy the Greek, for those who don't know, he brought what was in Vegas, out of Vegas, onto the TV, and it's amazing what he was able to talk about in the late 70s, early 80s, in the way he was. I feel like gambling and the networks clamped up after that, so people don't realize what he did and what he said, but he was freely talking about the lines. He was helping make them. He was in newspaper columns. I mean, he was the guy who was being talked about and talking about gambling in the 70s and 80s, when it was first getting out of the shadows and at least was legal in Vegas.
But what was interesting about him, and I agree, he's got to be in there. He went on the NFL Today, and it was a big controversy just to get him on there, even though the commissioner of the NFL at the time, Pete Rozelle, knew exactly what his role was. They had to be so careful about how he framed his information. He couldn't say, I think the Bears are going to beat the Rams 21-17. If the spread was 6, then he would have to say, or let's say the spread was 7, he would say, I think the Bears are going to beat the Rams 25-17. It would be a score that never happens in the NFL.
Right.
But because
So
he had to let people know he liked the Bears to cover in that game, he would have to say exactly what it's going to be.
It's amazing that and then he just blew it on something not gambling.
Right. Raheem, who is another entrant into the Sports Betting Hall of Fame.
It has to be Billy Walters, by far. I mean, this guy, he revolutionized modeling when it comes to creating your own point spread. He basically turned sports betting into Walmart because he has a bunch of handicappers under him. He's been able to reinvent himself time and time and again. And then one of the things that is really intriguing about Billy Walters is his ability to head fake and manipulate the market, which has kept him around longer than it otherwise would. So to give you a good example on head fakes, so let's just say the Jacksonville Jaguars are playing the Arizona Cardinals this week. If he liked Jacksonville, he might come out and say, you know what, give me 50,000 on the Arizona Cardinals. Let's push that line up. And then later on in the week, everybody's like trailing and, you know, seeing that head fake and thinking that's the side, and then he's going to come back and take the Jacksonville Jaguars at 9. So it's just stuff like that. It's just, he's just far and beyond one of the best bettors of all time. He had $3.5 million on the Super Bowl against with the Saints when they won the Super Bowl. So he's just a legend.
Simon, you are a professional bettor. You do it via modeling. What kind of influence? You are basically a direct descendant of Billy Walters.
100%. Everything I've really learned and done in my life has been after Billy. And I would say my biggest advice to other people to learn from Billy is sports betting is how you make a little bit of money, but it's not how you make all your money. Billy, he took that money from sports betting and he invested in other things. He bought real estate. He bet a lot on the golf course too. Everyone knows these legendary stories about Billy and his gambling on side bets. That's what I really took from him, is that this is kind of a vessel to do other things with this money. Because Billy tells people all the time, this isn't for the long run. He's had to hire hundreds of runners just to get his bets down in small markets and small bets here and there, because no one's going to take this kind of action. And sportsbooks are wise to Billy's movement. So what Raheem was talking about, him moving those lines, man, he did that all of the 90s, a lot of the 80s. By the 2000s, it all kind of caught up to Billy. So there's no doubt there is, in my mind, no greater better than Billy. But to put him in the Hall of Fame first round, no doubt. I mean, he is a first round guy.
Right. Well, Darren, explain a little bit. He basically turned sports betting from a mom and pop organization into something that can be considered a legitimate conglomerate, if we're talking about sort of the metaphors of business to business.
People talk about the word investing in gambling, and until him, it was really just one big joke. But he essentially, with what he was modeling, made it akin to what people were doing on Wall Street. We often say that sports betting has a lot more information than what happens on Wall Street. Companies only have to report 4 times a year. We know a lot more about what we're betting on. He actually had the computers and the modeling and was looking at it in a way where the information that we have then allows you to make bets that you could say are better shots than some of the companies that you're taking on the stock exchange. So he was clearly one of those guys that, he helped the credibility of gambling. And when he went on with Lara Logan on 60 Minutes, and for the first time, because he was always quiet about it, told that story, I think that was a big moment for sports betting, because people think about how did we get to here and how was the ease once it was legalized? How was it seen as, from not shady to okay? And I think that story on 60 Minutes with Billy Walters was the single most important story to the credibility of sports gambling as something that is real and not just something that, is just done in the alleys.
And I think it gave it a different look too. Instead of being some shady looking fat guy who's coming in late at night making these bets.
Eating Doritos.
Yeah, it was this well-groomed, wealthy guy who's very smart, had all of his computer screens up, had his headset on, talking to all of his different runners and connects all on game day. Again, we'd never seen anything like it. Billy really revolutionized, brought into the 21st century what we do. And he spawned, thousands of people who use data and the computer to get their number. So again, I can't stress enough how much Billy really changed everything.
All right, Darren, your turn. Who would be your entrant into the Sports Betting Hall of Fame?
I think Haralobos.
Haralobos Voulgaris,
Yes.
a.k.a. Bob Voulgaris. Explain
The
yourself.
Greek god of betting. No, listen, I had never heard of him until, through Twitter, him talking about, what he did. He was a specific sport, right? So the NBA and his methods on how he looked at player value and the game. And for me, that was really interesting, because normally you think of bettors as bettors in all sports. They're willing to bet everything. And then you have a guy taken from kind of the Billy Walters who distills the data, and the way he talks, anyone who bet the NBA had to follow him on Twitter. And then obviously going from there to then getting the attention through his quant work with Mark Cuban and pretty much, being able to become an NBA executive, that move we had never seen before. That his information was so valuable team-wise that those owners had to hire him. I think that makes him a new Hall of Fame member, a guy of this generation who managed to get into the social media and the quant. He kind of mixes the Billy Walters with the Jimmy the Greek and then like takes it to the next level. And the executive part, I think, is the twist that makes him like, yes, we have to put him in now.
Well, yeah, years and years ago, when I was editor-in-chief of ESPN, the magazine, we used to do an issue every year called the Analytics issue. And it would focus on how analytics is influencing sport, and it was timed to the Sloan Business School at MIT, the Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. And we had done a story about Bob Voulgaris. One of our writers had done it. Amazing story that shows sort of his entire trajectory and how he came from Canada, how he got into betting NBA halftimes, how he threw away his entire formula because he realized that the bookmakers were catching up to it, hired someone to be tracking every play in every game and sort of rebuild everything. It was almost like Tiger Woods breaks down his, like, is at the top of his game, realizes that people are catching up, breaks down his entire swing and starts from scratch and then gets even better, right? And so Bob was dominating the market. We do this story. We end up not being able to run the story in the NBA preview, and we decided to run the analytics issue. And Bob was really upset because he wanted to be in the NBA preview issue because he saw himself as driving the NBA market and being someone who was an NBA influencer. And ended up being in the analytics issue. Great story. And with that, Bob was invited to speak at the Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. Easily the greatest gambling panelist in the history of that conference. For years, people kept saying, can you get him to come back? Can you get him to come back?
Because he just says things that blow you away.
He is so much smarter than everybody else and is so willing. He's the perfect representation of gambling because he's so iconoclastic, so self-confident, so believes in his own numbers. When we started Action in 2017, I remember calling Bob and asking if he would want to get involved, if he would do podcasts, whatever it was. And he didn't want to do it because he was already trying to transition out of gambling and getting into the NBA. But he also was like, and this was obvious on Twitter, he's like, I am doing so well in crypto and so much better on this than NBA. I'm not even really thinking about it right now. No doubt he 100% belongs.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, the thing I love about this guy is he's so cocky, and he has a reason to back it up. Like, I'll never forget this. People look at the Golden State Warriors; they're a dynasty now. But at one point in time, David Lee was the starting power forward of the Golden State Warriors. So he tweeted out, and at the time, David Lee is a two-time All-Star. He says the Warriors are a David Lee injury from being a championship team. And it really happened because David Lee gets hurt, Draymond Green steps in, and everybody knows Draymond Green is a great defensive power forward. David Lee, his time in the league, he can't stretch the floor, he can't defend. So if you can't stretch the floor or defend as a stretch four, your days are numbered. And he saw that, and we watched it in real time. And that's when I was like, you know what? This guy, Bob Voulgaris, is the truth. And then I had an interaction with him one day where I think, for whatever reason, he posted his model. He posted his number on one of these games. And I asked him about it because I'm trying to learn as a young bettor. And he sent me a DM, and he was like, yeah, it does this and it does that. And I think it was a Charlotte Hornets second half total. The total went under by 26 points with ease. And I'm like, this guy's, he really is what he said he is.
All right, Bob Voulgaris. We're all a little bit enamored with him. He's fantastic. Billy Walters, Jimmy the Greek, Bob Voulgaris. We're going to add two more people to the Sports Betting Hall of Fame. Simon, who would you nominate?
I would nominate all the guys' names you don't know, Chad. I think it's one of these businesses where the best sports bettors are the names you've never heard of, the guys' faces you don't know. Man, I can't tell you how many people I know have bet for sports for over 40 years and they haven't stepped into a sports book and placed a single dollar in those 40 years because it's just the way the business is. So I would say the Hall of Fame, they should leave a spot open for the unnamed Hall of Famers.
The unknown gambler.
Exactly.
You know what? That's actually a great idea. Because the truth is, it's the people we know who might not even be the best bettors. Like outside of Billy Walters and Bob Voulgaris, like those guys have proven it. They're legit. But there are so many bettors out there who do this who want no attention. And that's always the interesting thing, is because when you're a professional sports bettor, you don't want anyone to be your boss. You don't want to follow anyone else's rules. And you also are so freaking arrogant because you're the one who believes that you have more information, you have better information, you're smarter, you can do something against the market that no one else can do. And it's almost impossible not to want to tell the world that.
But you don't want to do that because then it's going to get harder for you
Then
to do
you
your
lose
job.
your entire advantage.
Right.
So you're not wrong that like the Hall of Fame should include the guys who nobody knows because their ego is like wrapped up in how much money they're making.
And those are the guys that are moving the lines. So that's the weirdest part about it. It's like you see the line move, it's one of these guys that are moving that line.
I love that entrant. All right, last entry for the Sports Betting Hall of Fame, Darren Rovell.
I think we got to go with Jeopardy James. Obviously, the run that he made, the total changing of the strategy on how to look at a Jeopardy board, right? Like normally people would be like, well, I'm just going to answer all the questions. I'm going to go from 200 to 1,000, go all the way down, not picking out the board, not starting at the thousands. He came in with not only knowing that, hey, I know the answers to these things, but also I'm going to play strategy here. And the way he did it, and really, there was this break from Ken Jennings to him, and the whole country was talking about him. And I think the fact that he said that his experience as a gambler helped him, strategize, not only from picking the board, but also at Final Jeopardy, make sure he wins, the quick math that he had done in his head, what this person would have to bet. You never think about the skills behind the skills. You only think about an encyclopedic knowledge. That you think that's the only thing that makes you be a Jeopardy champion. And he proved that wasn't the case. And he proved that he could, and it's great for, I think, gambling overall, that he proved that his skill set that he learned from gambling was key to making him, one of the greatest Jeopardy champions of all time.
I'm looking at Simon because, well, go ahead.
You left out the biggest detail. A gambler is always looking for an edge. And that's really what he kind of showed to the world. It's like, we might say crazy stuff, we might be doing crazy things, but we always have a little bit of a plan. And that's what I think sets sports bettors apart from other people in different professions, is not that we're always looking for the easiest way, but we're always looking at, there's something different here, there's something people are missing. And James brought that to Jeopardy. He realized that this is a game, and you can play the game a certain way. And if you risk more, like in sports betting, the reward's so much greater. Because whatever he lost, he would get it back on the double Jeopardy. Yeah. So it's one of those things where he's absolutely in the Hall of Fame. He kind of brought, not the softer side of sports betting into the mainstream, but he did. I mean, he's like a friendly, happy, nice guy. And he talked about how I'm a genius, but without sports betting, I wouldn't have won 60 shows in a row. He needed that edge.
Much like Billy Walters. I mean, it did something for gambling at large. It wasn't only for him. It was another part of the movement towards the accepting of gambling, which, obviously now we're at the point where we have so many states that are legal. And I think we don't talk about his contribution to, every single article said he was a sports gambler. And we just hadn't had much talk about professional sports gamblers in the mainstream. And so I think that helped immeasurably.
He has helped reappropriate sports betting. Like, when you looked at sports bettors before, they were the guys with mob ties and inside information. And I think guys like Jeopardy James, they're more data analysis and analytical. And I think I'm coming from the same approach. Like, I don't have somebody at the stadium telling me, oh yeah, the quarterback was drunk last night, or the wind is going in this direction. So I think he has had an impact that's Hall of Fame worthy.
Yeah, you could win with what you know instead of who you know.
Oh, that's good. I actually thought when we were going to do Jeopardy James, I kind of thought it was corny because I feel like he might not even be that good of a bettor.
We don't know.
In fact, the rep
know.
in Vegas is that he's not that good of a
He
bettor.
lived in a one-bedroom apartment.
Right.
Right. And so, like, when we were nominating him, you guys actually turned me around because I thought, I feel like we're just doing it,
I got to push back on Simon's comment because I think if you're making a living off sports betting, you're one of the 1% who's able to do it. So I don't want to say he's not that good because I feel like that's a little bit disrespectful.
Yeah, Simon.
Of course he's good, but on Hall of Fame good? I don't know.
But we're not talking about. But see, that's the thing. We're actually not talking about his record, right? We might have been talking about Billy Walters'
talking
record.
about what he did for the game.
Correct.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what makes.
I'm not putting him down.
Right.
I just think, of course, I could drop you about 100 names. Through these dudes made real money. Where it's like James treaded water for about 10 years in Vegas. Nothing against him. It just shows how hard. Like, I mean, the guys we're talking about here. This is the apex. Okay.
Yeah.
Billy, that's the top. Ain't no one ever gonna get to what Billy did. Okay. It's just.
Yeah.
He is Michael Jordan. But for what James did, like we just talked about, he just made it where sports betting just became legalized, and then you have this guy that's always smiling. He's always really nice. Kind of put a nice face on it where it's like, okay, not all sports bettors are these really weird, grungy guys. Like Raheem was saying, he's a good, nice guy, and he uses the math to back up what he's saying, which, again, that's a big part of what sports betting is now. It's a lot of analytics.
All right, I'm sold. Jeopardy James is in. Billy Walters is in. Jimmy the Greek is in. Haralobos Voulgaris is in. The unknown gamblers whose ego is all tied to the cash they make. They don't care if anyone ever knows who they are. They are the antithesis of the four of us. God bless them. They are in. And maybe the person who wins the Sports Betting National Championship from DraftKings will one day get to join this list. All right, guys, thanks for being here. Let's get the movement started right now, people. Let's get the Sports Betting Hall of Fame built.